Guys, I'm going to go ahead and dive into this video while I am good and angry. That way it'll be just a fabulous response / rebuttal video. So a video just came out from Culture, Faith, and Politics. That's the name of the channel. And it says, one Bible verse blows up Maga's false version of Christian faith. And basically he was denigrating Maga Christianity, or basically any Christian that supports the Maga movement in the last couple of years. And obviously this is an attack on Christian nationalism as well. And so let's just set the record very clear and very straight. Number one, there is no political movement nor church movement in the world nor in history that is perfect. And so to get on to small nuances in light of bigger picture items is quite a misunderstanding. But this gets a lot deeper than that. It gets much more problematic than small misunderstandings. There actually becomes massive misunderstandings. So let's divide some things up. Number one, there is a real version of Christianity in America that can be confused with the conservative American movement of Christianity. I personally would say, by and large, that the MAGA movement is American Christianity, not necessarily true Christianity. So there is, number one, a very big divide between the two. So there are people that can be Christian nationalist in the bad sense who are more patriot, my country oriented than they are kingdom heaven oriented. But this man's attack is that if you are kingdom oriented, there is no way you can align with these other set of principles. So I want to nuance, first of all, that there are believers in God who are not necessarily followers of Jesus Christ. And so this can be very confusing if you're trying to look at this just from a macro perspective only. You can't do that in this scenario. But then he dials in as like, basically, I have one Bible verse that is going to destroy the whole MAGA empire. And he quotes for us John 1:27. This basically tells us to look after widows and orphans in their affliction and to keep ourselves from being polluted by the world. And I'm not getting into specifics. I have got summary statements here. Again, this is a reaction video to this. And basically, he is stating that the MAGA movement in general is not taking care of widows and orphans. And then he kind of develops that a little further. It's like, true religion is this, which is to take care of widows and orphans. And for any real Christian, is this a surprising passage of Scripture? Not in the slightest. Do you know how long this has been going on? It goes all the way back through the Old Testament, and he actually does grab a few of the Old Testament verses and show this. So any Christian should be aware that we have to take care of widows and orphans. This is nothing new. What would be something new is if we are not taking care of widows and orphans, then that reveals our religion is bad. Now, so if you wish to attack the MAGA movement in general, if you want to attack American Christianity, which again, that I'd say is different than technically Jesus following Christianity, though they might even think they're Jesus followers, even though they haven't committed their heart to Jesus Christ or been baptized or go to church. If you want to attack that large swath of people and say they're not really following the creeds of Christianity, etc., in taking care of widows and orphans, you might be correct in the precise sense that maybe they are not actively, personally involved in doing this. But I would say you are heavily off course if you blamed the Jesus-following Christians who support the MAGA movement in general and say that they are not taking care of widows and orphans. I think you would be way far off track. And I think that'd be really easy to prove. All we'd have to do is go to these little churches, go to these medium-sized, even large churches, and say, what are you doing for your widows and orphans? And I'm pretty certain you're going to find things that they are doing for widows and orphans collectively at church and in the privacy of their own lives. I don't think that's going to be hard to find at all. But if you went and just sampled the Republicans of America and tried to find out what they specifically are doing, you'd probably be hard-pressed to find that. But that's one of the reasons that we're trying to lead them to Christ, is it not? However, there is a bigger thing in play of how we should take care of widows and orphans, which I will get to, because there's more than one way to take care of widows and orphans. And this guy totally seems without the comprehension of how that is. One of the things he was like is, I'm not really, pushing this towards a social gospel precisely. But he clearly states this: he is against Christians who impose Christian values on culture by law for just a few hot-button issues. This is truly somebody that has not deeply thought through their positions, though he might do otherwise. And his claim is that he used to be a Republican, and now he can't, after 2016, there's no way I can any longer be a Republican because that just doesn't work. Well, I want to share also that I used to be a die-hard Republican in the sense that Republican is right across the board, etc. But of course, as you study and learn some things, you do adapt your position. So I am still incredibly Republican, but I do have a few nuances. So like, for instance, when we came over from Europe, and we were escaping as Christians, as we were escaping the oppression, the religious oppression, and we were coming over here to establish freedoms and whatnot, one of the things that we left behind was land-dominated and family-dominated empires. Okay, we left that behind. And this is one of the reasons there is inheritance tax here in the U.S., is we are trying to break up those family power dynamics. Whew, so that's smart, right? We got out from under that. Of course, now the corporation has replaced that, and any Christian looking at large corporations should be able to go, man, these things are some nasty business. It becomes a greed fest. So there is some way to look at this. Personally, as a Republican, I'm still for business. I am absolutely for business, but I am against monopolies and I am against greed. And there's more than one way to address this. But one of the things that the four founding fathers and the forefathers stated was that you have to have religion and our governmental structure to keep these things in check. And so something I've recently proposed, and people laugh at, but they really should think about this, is like, you need to be winning millionaires, or actually, forget that, billionaires to Christ. You need to be winning them to Christ, making sure they have religion so that they are more loving and charitable in their actions. And if you just allow sinful, greedy people to go up into power, you're going to have some serious issues. And so I do think there is some leeway in the corporate structure of America. Like, maybe we should limit corporations to only certain states. I know they can be founded in a state, but they get to reach across America. Maybe that should be broken up the way we broke up Ma Bell, and brought her into 4 quadrants. But even in your local utility districts, you still got these monopolies. And I do think those things need to be addressed. So I'm not 1,000% on a certain political spectrum. However, I'm heavily Republican because it has the best value system. Now, here is where it's really odd to me that you, Mr. Culture, Faith, and Politics, I didn't bother to look up your name. Like I said, it just ran out the door, and I'm like, we're gonna address this. So it just astounds me that you don't think that he said Christian values should be impressed by law. No, I don't think you can impress by law that you need to be a Christian. That is stupid. But as a Christian, I realize there are foundational laws to reality, baby. The moral law of murder and killing, that's a foundational law. That's not a Christian value, and that does need to be impressed upon everyone. What about theft and stealing? Is that a Christian value, or is it just a value? I think that value should be imposed on everyone through the sake of the government. And we could continue to go down that line, but like when you think, oh, I don't think I should take my Christian values and like press them onto culture. Huh? These values are everyone values that the Bible just highlights and exposes. That's why we are so radical in enforcing and standing for these values. Where are you at with your thinking? So he said this verse rules out the priorities of the Maga movement. Hardly. In taking care of the widows and orphans, we know that the majority of those foundation principles, not Christian principles and morals of the universe, are found with the Republican side of the party. And in that case, well, how else can I vote? And he's like, on a few hot button issues. If I had to vote on one issue and stand before God on this issue, you already know what it would be. I am pro-life, and look how many pro-life things have come out of the Republican Party in the last few years. Or are you not paying attention? Or are you ignoring the poor and needy babies, the ones that are underrepresented? Like, if you're not pro-MAGA, what are you? Are you pacifist, or are you leftist, or he says, I don't want to get into proof texting. And then he mentions something about authority abuse. Again, when you look at the overall structure of the Republican Party, it's not about authority abuse. It's about what governing principles are best for everyone. Is it that we should have large government taking care of everything? Or is it that we believe in the family and the church? Is it we believe in life, or we believe in death? Is it that we are pro-sexual deviance, or we're pro-constraint? These are not Christian values. They are just values. And if you don't regulate them or keep them in constraints, then you're going to have some serious issues. And he goes further to say this is about our orientation towards God and how we express that in the world. Orientation towards God and how we express that in the world. Yeah, my orientation is that God actually created this place, that he put solid morals, not Christian values, into place that have to be taken into account. We'll get into this a little more in a second. He says in the entire book of James, it makes you ashamed of being in the MAGA movement. As one who has read the book of James somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 50 times, I don't count, because that I have a tendency towards pride myself. And so, if I counted how many times, I'd be like, hey, I've read it this many more times than you. So I don't count, but I have read it a ton of times and over many years of my life. And so you come back again and, learn a little more about the angles. But it's funny to me that you find the foundational verse of the book of James about widows and orphans instead of about the general overarching principle of doing what we know to do. How did you miss that? It says, to him who knows to do good and doesn't do it, it is a sin. That will include widows and orphans, but so much more. What about the confessing of our sins? What about confessing the sins that we have instead of, like just pointing out supposed sins of others? But, and you asked for this. You said you want to hear the feedback. You're like, how can you read the book of James and support this crazy movement? A question I have you ever heard of Cyrus, Herod, Nebuchadnezzar? Have you heard of any of these guys that God took someone and put them into a power position that wasn't exactly his follower, but he used them for his means and his graces? Like, you even believe that on your side. But yeah, government entities are put into place by God himself. He says he puts these people in place and that we get what we deserve. That says a lot about the last election previous, where we got what we deserved as a country. Yeah. So I'm not going, and he says, I'm not going to say that we have to have a certain economic approach, etc. I would say we do have to have a certain economic approach. So let's talk about taking care of the widows and orphans for a minute, and kind of cutting this off at the pass. I think your approach seems to be, MAGA is all about business and money and power, but oh, we're good Christians. We're gonna let the government take care of widows and orphans. Like, number one, do you realize that in the government structure that those widows and orphans are kind of already taken care of? Now, I'm not pushing off responsibility, because like I said, you go to the local church, you'll find that we're always involved in these things. But do you realize we already have systems in place for these things? And in those systems that are in place, do you already realize that there is vast abuse in these things? We'll just bring up food stamps for a moment. Some of you middle-class white Christians might not be aware of this, and you might just think of all the good that the government is doing by administering food stamps, and they're just handing out, these rations regardless. We're just handing them out everywhere. Have you ever been in any of these neighborhoods? Do you know how these food stamps get sold for money? Do you actually stay on top of this? Do you realize that people that could be working, who refuse to work, who want to do nefarious things or be lazy, and isn't laziness a sin? Isn't lying about circumstances a sin? Isn't, possibly getting pregnant again just to have more income a sin? How are we addressing those things? And does God anywhere in the scriptures recommend zero accountability? Is that not taking care? Like, if we really want to take care of our true widows and orphans, why not dial down and get into accountability and find these people that are selling food stamps and lock them up, put them in jail? And then take those real food stamps and the real resources attached to that and put them in the hands of those that really need it. But I think I have a solution for that. I think I understand this dilemma. So while the MAGA movement is being accused of not caring, the Christians in the MAGA movement are being accused of not caring, is it possible that those that are liberal Christians who are, let's say, comfortable or comfortable Christians, or should I say barely Christian? Barely Christians who actually aren't involved in taking care of widows and orphans, and their conscience is bothering them. And so what can I do without getting my hands dirty? instead of getting directly involved and seeing the actual real needs firsthand, as some of the things have been mentioned, and maybe I can just vote somebody else to do it, and let's let the government take care of that. Do you realize the scriptures, if we're going to be Christian, already have some guidance? Do you know what God's command for government is? Wait a minute. Or if we're going to be Christians here and you don't believe in imposing your Christian views on culture, do you realize that God in Romans also has a structure for the government? It's to punish wickedness and to reward goodness. I bet we can get into the nuances of how government is a little more than that, but we don't need to be looking at the government as our ability to do our charity. And in fact, that doesn't take care of widows and orphans either. Because if we're going to let the government do our charity also without accountability, then there's going to be waste. And they're not going to do. Yeah, are you familiar with, like, around the world that we send out foreign aid packages, and the drug dealers and the tyrants and the power mongers in these places steal the aid? Are you keeping up with some of this? They steal it and don't ever administer it where it's really supposed to be. So if you think the government is going to do your job for you, you're foolish. You're foolish. It is our job as Christians to do it. And if you think that higher taxes, let's do higher taxes to take care of the poor and the widows. So again, that higher taxes gets misused. But then how many widows are already struggling with their property taxes going up and inflation going up and from handing out free money everywhere? You hand out free money, these businessmen are like, I'm going to get that free money. And so they raise prices. Have you made this connection? Is that taking care of widows and orphans and the poor by letting the taxes go rampant? I know who is against high taxes. How's your views holding up right now? So, he brings out a list of certain verses about seeking justice, or actually the poor and the widow, and then seeking justice. Some of the verses that he lists on this channel, Culture, Faith, and Politics, actually listed, we got to take care of the widows and orphans, and we got to do good, and we need to seek justice and seek justice. What does that mean? What is the Bible stance on crime? Where did the idea of capital punishment come from? Where did the idea of eradicating wickedness come from? Have you read through the Old Testament lately? Or are you one of those ones that like to wash that away and don't realize that there needs to be some strength back to abusing authority? You think it's abusing authority because it's actually enforcing of real morality. Wow. Then he mentioned something about, not really caring for the immigrants, not really, caring for the foreigners that are among us. And the Bible's very clear. We're supposed to care for the foreigners that are among us. And to that, I just asked the simple question, like, are you keeping up with how much foreign aid we try to send out? Have you kept up with how much the churches in charity send out to the immigrants around the world? Are you familiar with how many missionaries we send from here that give up this lifestyle for an inferior lifestyle to go help others? Are you familiar with the military interventions? Are you familiar with those military interventions where we go get involved so that the tyrants don't try to take over and oppress everybody? Are you familiar with how we're treating the immigrants? But maybe you think that, like, I'm pretty sure I know where your stance on the border wall and ICE is, because that's we're treating these people so rough and so mean. And I'm not saying that some aren't, but what I will say is, do you think it's good? Let me just ask this question. You're going to bring 10 million, from what I understand, it's 10 million people in the past, several years while we were getting what we deserved. Do you think it's good for the poor the widows and the orphans and the poor and others that are very poor, for them to now have to fight over housing. Do you want all these 10 million people that came in to sleep on the ground? Or oh, do you want to put them up somewhere? Oh, you want them to have housing. But you know what happens when housing is in shortage? Rent values go through the roof. And I know many, many, many people who are struggling with rent because all the housing is completely full. And on top of this, we see, I don't know about where you're at, but we're seeing cultural breakdown where there is a defiance of law and order and God. So if you're a Bible believer, like you're all caught up in this one verse in James that you know, heightened even above where it's supposed to be, again, we're totally responsible to do these things, but it is part of our responsibilities. What about verses like in Galatians? I think it's 5:19 or whatnot, but it's like, do good to everyone, but especially the household of faith. What? Huh? Let me ask this about a father. Should a father be more good to the children in the neighborhood, or should he take care of his own children first? What is the Bible's precedent for faith and family, faith and church, and then could we extrapolate maybe where that goes culturally? Because if you don't take care of your own house, your house will fall. And if this house falls, maybe you should read the 800-page diary that I have read about Ronald Reagan and how he was like, we are the ones that are keeping the enemies at the gates. Like we're holding them back. We're like a domino. If this country falls to liberalism and communism and socialism, that, oh, everything can be good and handy dandy, and Christians are supposed to be part of this culture, but we're not supposed to be leading the culture. Like if this country fails with our military might or with our economy, it's going to be dominoes for all these other countries that we're supporting, that they have military aid or backing or partnership with us, and you're going to see evil arise like you've never seen. And so there's more than one way to take care of widows and orphans rather than voting for somebody else to take some dollars and run over there, because I really don't want to be involved with these people firsthand. And I don't know if you are or not, but I'm just saying there's a lot of people that are like this. And so you want to know how we can support the Maga movement. I don't think everything about it is correct. I was actually at a rally where I saw Donald Trump speaking, and I saw somebody raising their hand. I get it, man. If you focused on that and you saw that and you thought they were worshiping Donald Trump, you'd be right and I'd be sick too. I'm like, that's not where this goes. That's dumb. But to not understand that this is about being pro-life, being pro an economic system that we can all survive and thrive under, to understand that we should have a meritocracy, because the Bible even says if you don't work, you shouldn't eat. You realize that part where I think it was Paul was addressing this, and he's like, yeah, the church is a charity organization. You know, it should take people on board. But like these young women that come and devote themselves to church, you should first tell them that, whoa. Maybe you should try to sustain yourself before you just throw yourself on the feet of the church. Let's see. And if you can mostly support yourself, then we can help you and not just like be burdened by this. And then he had to say, if you don't work, you shouldn't eat. Are you wrapping all of these fundamentals together when you're making your political decisions or producing your videos? So I responded. I think we have solid, superb ground to stand on, and I'm willing to fight for this with free speech as long as possible. Too bad only about 30 people will ever see this video.